Hey fam, it's Kamryn here coming at you with a brand new podcast, Hot Takes with Kamryn. Welcome back to Season 1, Episode 2 of Hot Takes with Kamryn. Hey, thanks for joining in today. I have my friend Austin with me.
Hi.
Oh boy, you can tell it's going to be an interesting 30 minutes.
You asked for this, Kamryn.
I did ask for this, but here we go anyway. We're just diving in to the topic of vulnerability today. And definitely in this whole first season, we're more so talking about why it's so important to be vulnerable, why it's so important to be into everything that God is into and everything that he says in his word. If you didn't check out the last episode, go back, listen to that. It will help this episode make a lot more sense. So we're just going to dig in here.
Literally stop listening right now.
For real.
Pause this. Go listen to it and come back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Listen to
We'll
Austin.
wait.
We will wait.
Wow. What a great first episode. Was that not, Kamryn? I loved what you talked about
I swear, I think
In
it's pretty dope.
in that first episode.
Yeah,
It was really good.
The whole Bible. It says in the Bible, in 1 Peter 5:5, it says, "In the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. All of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble." And now me and Austin, we attend this group at our church, Providence, every Tuesday night. And the main thing that I think we both like about this group is that you can share anything and not be judged about it. And it's just so refreshing to know that you have a place. But on your end as well, you have to have a certain level of humility to be able to share about anything that you're going through. Because, the passage there says, "In the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders." If you submit to someone, then you're also sharing your life with that person. So if I'm submitting to Austin and, I tell him about something that I'm going through, I need his help, the only way he's going to be able to help me is that if I totally submit to him. So the key to walking forward there is just having that humility. It says in James 5:16, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed." And I think there's two things to that verse. A lot of people, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this, Austin, in church, where people have said, "Oh, it's just an unspoken request."
What, like praying?
Yeah, for prayer. They just as an unspoken request.
You just put it in God's inbox, and he'll get to it when he gets to it.
I'm sorry, that gives me the Christian ick.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
The Christian ick right there. Why? Because there's two parts to that. Therefore, confess your sins, and it says not or, it says and pray for each other so that you may be healed. I'm thinking there that the and is very important in that situation, because it says that in other passages, hey, if we're not confessing to one another, then we don't have a chance walking forward. Like I said in 1 Peter 5:5, it says that if you submit yourselves to others, you clothe yourself in humility. That's how you're going to walk forward. That's how God accepts things. It says God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. So I think it's very, very much key to do it. And Romans 15:7 says, "Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God." So if I'm sharing something with Austin, and he's just total dissing me about this, I mean, I don't understand how that's bringing praise to God. I mean, you think when we're a men's group, we're able to share, and then everyone's just so accepting of the fact that we just shared. I mean, I know.
Yeah, and even as far as you sharing something, and you're even you're the one that was in the wrong in that situation, our men's group has no problem telling you that you goofed.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful thing. And I also want to point out too with the Romans verse that you said. What can you reread it again? Reread it for me?
Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God.
Here's your first hot take. And notice how it doesn't say accepting as Christ loved you, unless this person's doing this or this person's doing that. It says accepting the despite everything. There's your first hot take
Hot
for
take
the evening.
with Austin L.
Yeah, with Austin L. Yeah.
Wow.
That's right. That's me.
Yeah, but no, in all seriousness though, yeah, accepting one another, because if you can create a space of vulnerability, no one is going to be vulnerable, because the human nature of a person does not promote of God, and of God is vulnerability. Everything that God was, that he is, and that he did on this earth is absolute not subject in human nature. It's not even a thought to human nature. Why? Because human nature, we were born into sin nature, not a holy mindset. On the subject of being born into a sin nature, we aren't naturally humble. And I shared this a little bit back in the last episode. I even shared this in men's group with one of our friends, going through a little situation with
a rough patch
with his family. But everywhere that man failed at in the past, God came in, redeemed, and has provided a walking path for you to walk through it and not be stuck in it. You know, I talked about in the last episode where Jesus was literally walking in the streets and a naked woman was thrown out in front of him.
Yes.
Any man would have freaking lusted.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. But Jesus didn't stop, and, you know, I mean, he didn't say anything about our appearance. You know, he went right to the issue. He addressed it with truth and grace.
Yeah.
So, you know, Jesus came to literally.
Yeah, he didn't necessarily care that she was naked. She cared that she was hurting.
Exactly.
That's more of what he cared about in that situation.
Uh-huh. And the thing is that you can link everything that Jesus conquered in the New Testament back to the Old Testament, like David and Bathsheba.
Mm-hmm.
David was literally on the rooftop looking at a naked woman.
Yep.
Another spiritual or religious authority, David, just like Jesus was at the time.
King David, yeah.
The King David,
yeah,
was literally lusted over this woman, and, you know, he did it. So, certainly God has come to restore everywhere where we failed out in the past, especially in the fact of vulnerability. I was just telling Austin earlier before we started recording this that in the Bible, it says in Philippians 2:8, this is the Passions Translation, so if you don't like it, pull out another translations, but this does speak the subject very well. Philippians 2:8, the Passions Translation. If you don't like it, find another version to follow along, but I do believe that this translation communicates this subject well. And it says in Philippians 2:8, he humbled himself and became vulnerable, choosing to be revealed as a man, and was obedient. He was a perfect example even in his death, a criminal's death by crucifixion. So literally this man, Jesus, who is 100% man, 100% God, comes and he reveals himself not as God, but as a man. Literally.
As a little baby.
Yeah, he was a baby.
Yeah, he was a baby.
Was born by this woman, Mary. And now it wasn't a normal birth, though. We all know that she was a virgin. And but he chose to come into the world as a baby, not as how everyone else was expecting for their savior to look. Everyone else was looking for a warrior. And Jesus chose to be humble. He chose to be born in a stable. But certainly Jesus laid his life down and chose to be vulnerable. And the best passage about vulnerability, it was in Matthew 26:37 through 39. He says that he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. And just the statement alone in 38, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. to the point of death. I mean, that's just a powerful statement all in one. And I mean, when we think of sorrow, the word in the dictionary, the standard dictionary, says that it's a feeling of deep distress caused by loss, disappointment, or other misfortunes suffered by oneself or others.
Yes.
It's a deep distress. And he's overwhelmed. So totally, I can't imagine what Jesus was feeling in this moment. Like, he knew what was going to happen. He's literally walking to this place where he's going to be arrested, where he's going to be taken, nails are going to be driven into his wrists, he's going to have a crown of thorns, he's going to get beat. And the thing about the crucifixion is, I mean, most people don't do a deep study in this, but it's really, really, really amazing if you have a doctor explain to you the crucifixion.
Yes. Roman crucifixion is, for those of you that don't know, still to this day considered one of the worst execution methods, pain-wise, in the history of the world. Like, it's worse than, being burnt at the stake. It's worse than, all the other stuff that you can read about medieval torture methods. Like, it's the worst, because not everybody died right away. Like, you went through all this pain. Not only did you have gravity pulling in all your tendons, all your this, that, and the other thing, you had the elements, you had, they starved you, plus, not to mention, Jesus was whipped beforehand.
Yeah, and the simple fact is that scholars, doctors, medical professionals have said that his organs would have been showing at the time that he was on the cross, a wooden cross. And, I mean, I'm thinking this wooden desk right in front of me is like, this is coated nice and smooth.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
It would have been just a tree cut down and shaped. Like, it wasn't. There was no polish. There was no. Yeah. No lacquer.
Mm-mm. And every time he would breathe, his body would just scrape up against. And it's so crazy to think of. Jesus knew what he was going to go through because he was 100% God. He was still 100% man, though. So he knew what was going to happen.
And he still went through with it.
He still went through with it. And he is sharing his sorrow to the two sons of Zebedee and Peter. He's saying, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. And then, like it says, he goes a little further and he gets to the ground and he prayed. He's like, God, if there's any way out of this, let it be. But not as I will, but as you will.
Yes. Which is a crazy thing to think about because, as you said, he is God. And he still prayed that prayer knowing full well there was no way out of it, I think.
Yeah, I certainly, I agree with that.
There's, he knew that this was the only way.
Yeah.
And he still was like, hey, if we can go a different route,
that'd be nice.
Let's do it. But he knew full intently that this was the only way. This is what
it's what he had to do.
What needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And went through it like a champion.
Yeah, and he is now at the right side of the Father in heaven. And certainly when Jesus went through that for us, that's just more and more, proof that he's conquered everything, so that he says, hey, you can also go through it, because the same Spirit that came upon him when he was baptized lives in all of us that are saved, that have the Holy Spirit. And now back onto the topic of one another, he was being vulnerable with one another. In our cases, we need to be vulnerable with one another to be able to grow. So in our cases, we have to be vulnerable with one another in order to grow as Christians. Like we were saying in men's group, how we'll share stuff sometimes, and it's always like there's always something that comes after it. Usually
you're pretty good at it.
I'm prophetic, so it's very natural. All I do is sit there and listen for God, and whatever God says, I'll fire at you, and if you like it, you like it. If it helps you, it helps you. If it means nothing, let it chew on it and come back to me a little later.
Yeah. And I feel like my role, at least recently, it's been kind of turned into just like, especially if somebody's bringing something super, super vulnerable, I just like to sit back and listen and just let them vent. That's kind of been my thing. I'll ask them a question or two. Sometimes they're a little heavy hitting. I can get there. I can, but I try not to at the same time because, I know that between you there and a couple other guys, like, they got that covered. I just need to sit back and listen and let the person just get out whatever they need to.
Exactly. And I mean, this is like total one thing that ticks me off about people who are prophetic and people who can just naturally hear the voice of God. When I give a prophetic word, it was like 2 weeks ago when I gave our friend who's going through that very horrible situation.
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Prophetic word, and it was crazy. I had questions for him, but the way the word came is I got a picture of him in front of his house. I started asking him about this house that I saw in my head, and he's just started opening up to this was like what I'm seeing is like exactly what he's going through.
It was his house, yeah.
It was his house.
Yeah, it was his house. That was the crazy part to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just, for me, it's like prophetic people, I think, sometimes get this mixed up that they just have to fire. I let him talk for how long before I said this word? I left other people take at him, give him encouragement before I said anything. And I think that's a thing that we need to be slow to speak and fast to listen, not the other way around. And then that's one thing I hear a lot in the prophetic word is, someone's going over with another person this word they got for them, and all they're doing is saying this word, and more emotion appears, and then the next thing you know, in 10 years you're going to get a car, in 15 years you're going to own a house, says the Lord. And I'm like, how?
That's great if that happens.
That's great if it happens.
Yeah.
I don't even the last time that I gave a prophetic word and I'm like, thus saith the Lord. I don't think I've ever done that.
Did you say it like that? And thus saith the Lord. No.
It's literally, I'm communicating the heart of God to this person, and if I want them to receive it, I have to be gentle with it. That's the part about accepting one another just as Christ accepted us, how it says that in Romans 15:7 we were talking about earlier, because I'm letting them take their time through this situation. Jesus is letting you take your time through this situation. If he wasn't, you'd be dead and in hell right now.
And I will say a thing too with the whole prophetic person thing, because I know my biggest gripe when it comes to prophetics and prophetic people, or just people who believe in the like power of prayer and things like that. One of the biggest flaws, and I'm gonna say this might cut deep to anybody who's listening. If you're giving a word to somebody who is going through something, or they're broken, it is not your job to fix that person. Far too often, people will try to give prophetic words thinking that this is going to fix everything in this person's life. All of a sudden, they're going to, literally what you see on YouTube, like they're going to start rolling around on the floor, and then you're just going to start speaking in tongues, and they're better. No, that's not how that works. I give prophetic words very rarely. I think it's one of my gifts. It's a gift I probably should use a little bit more often.
I mean, everyone can prophesy.
Yes.
It's literally hearing the voice of God and communicating God's heart for one another to that person through encouragement.
Yeah, and half the time, I will leave with a word, and I'll tell somebody, and I'll leave from the conversation, and I have no idea if it resonated.
Yeah, I literally did this once. I actually meet with a guy every week, or close to every week. We have dinner, and you know him. He comes to our men's group. But when we do this thing in men's group called Prophetic Hot Seat, and we just take time, pray about this person.
One of my favorite things.
It is totally my favorite thing in men's group. And for real, I just do it on my own now because I'm like, okay, I just love.
It could be a segment on a podcast.
That could be.
It could be.
Prophetic Hot Seat?
Prophetic Hot Seat, bro.
On the podcast. This would be cool.
on the podcast. It would be cool.
That actually might happen in season 2.
That could be a segment or like a little mini episode you could do every week.
Definitely. But I think, the biggest thing that happens in that circle is that, no one is totally saying, hey, this is 100% like gonna resonate with you. We don't know. People are emotionless. If Austin were to give me a prophetic word right now, I would look him dead in the eye and I wouldn't let him know how it made me feel, because I don't want faith to be fed by emotion. And when I gave this guy prophetic words in men's group, it made no sense because it was about freaking Tom and Jerry, dude. Like,
It was about Tom and
you remember
Jerry,
this.
Yeah.
But anyway, so a couple days later, I see this man in church, and we're praying at the end, and I get this vision, this blast of vision in my head about Jesus, like, closing doors. And I see this man running to different sides of the hallway, shutting off doors, and then he traps himself on the ends of the hallway, turns back, places his hands on the wall, and he just smiles and looks at Jesus like nothing was wrong. And then Jesus reached out, grabbed his hand, and took him. And then I blacked out of the vision. I saw this guy's face, and then I woke up into full consciousness. And I talked to this dude after church and gave him this vision that I had. I wrote it down to make sure that I could give him 100% what I saw. And he said nothing to me. Mind you, I get a text afterwards because I left church and I'm like, did I get it wrong? Did like, what happened? What didn't I get, God, And I didn't hear anything from God. So I get in the car, I drive to dinner, I get a text that night from this man that says, you do not even know how much that was speaking to my heart. He never gave me emotion to feed off of, and I don't even feed off of emotion. I've gave people prophetic words where they've collapsed in my arms crying.
Yeah.
I've received prophetic words where I've collapsed. Caleb gives me words all the time. Most of them make me collapse crying into his arms.
The first time I ever met Caleb, he gave me a prophetic word.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I thought he was an angel that day. That was fun.
And we're going to talk about that next episode, right?
Next episode, 100%. That's a part of my testimony. I can share that for sure.
But definitely, I've shown emotion getting prophetic words, and I've received emotion giving prophetic words, but it's never changed anything that I've done. It's never changed the prophet and what they've given you, anything else. But we have to accept one another in that way that we can just be, hey, vulnerable, get to the point. We can help one another. If there's prophetic words, great. If there's not, whatever. A quick thing about one another, it's Greek in the Bible, obviously, and it's pronounced alelon, and it's just one word, even though it's two words in the English language. And it's used 100 times in 94 New Testament verses, which 47 of those verses give instruction to followers of Jesus. And 60% of those commands were wrote by Paul. Now, vulnerability and one another go together, because if we ever expect anyone to be vulnerable, if we ever expect to share about our troubles in a group setting, which is hard, but it's not hard at our men's group because everyone accepts one another, so therefore we all have that accessibility to be vulnerable. And Paul writes about it in 2 Corinthians 6:11 through 13. This is the Passion's translation again, so if you don't really like this version, open to a new one, but this captures it well. It says, "My friends at Corinth, our hearts are wide open to you, and we speak freely, holding nothing back from you." Why? Why would they speak freely, holding nothing back? Because if there is a block in our relationship, it is not with us. For we carry you in our hearts and with great love, yet you still withhold your affections from us. So I speak to you as our children, make room in your hearts for us as we have done for you. Why would we need to make room in our hearts for one another? Because if we don't have that, it blocks our relationship. And Jesus literally came for us to live in community. Communion. So we have to definitely lay down our pride, be vulnerable with one another. It's not going to be easy. It's not. I'm being honest.
Yeah, no.
In
it's
most
not.
cases.
Yeah, especially like, and I'll speak on it because we've been talking about the men's group that we're a part of. Like, I don't know if you experienced this, but like when I was growing up, like I was conditioned that men don't talk about their feelings. You just keep it, you shove it down, you shove it down as far as you can go, and eventually it 9 times out of 10 it explodes, creates a very bad situation. At least from my experience, it creates that. But like we just have this societal thing where it's like men can't talk about their feelings. They can't talk about their issues because they're supposed to be the strong ones in the house. They're supposed to be the protectors, the providers, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like
that's a lie hidden within a biblical truth.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it's also just, no offense, but it's a really stupid mindset to have.
It is, honestly.
Because what's the basic thing? Like, I'll put it in perspective of like marriage, for example. You name a marriage that succeeds where the husband and wife don't communicate.
For real, though.
Name one.
For real,
Name
though.
one. But seriously, like that's a huge thing in when it comes to marriage. Like, and it that's 9 times out of 10 when something or somebody's having even just not even divorce issues, but just marriage issues in general, or relationship issues, like with your parents, with your siblings. Like, communication is, I'd say, probably 90 to 99% the big issue
in
it.
You certainly brought up a good point, because as Christians, we're literally the church, and the church is the bride of Christ. So if we can't be vulnerable with one another, why don't we just start being vulnerable with God? I mean, that's a stepping stone in our faith, being vulnerable with God, because we think that God is out with this lightning bolt to strike us down when we sin. Every time that I've committed a sin, and I know I commit a sin, and I know I was wrong, literally my words to God is, forgive me, God. I know what I did. I'm literally being vulnerable with my Creator, the Lord of the universe, who has every right in this world to kill me right now.
Yeah.
If we can be vulnerable with God, we can be vulnerable with a person who has no dominion over our life. Because even if we're vulnerable with the devil, we can still speak life and power over the resistance that he gives to us, and we're still over the enemy. He's under our feet. So I think certainly in the aspects of being vulnerable, start with God. I mean, it's certainly, I would think, a little easier to talk to people than literally the one that made you and has all the power in the universe.
Yeah, the guy that created everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But start to talk about it. It's the heart of God that we can all be in a room and be vulnerable. We can be the church when we choose to be the church. If we have to be one body of Christ, then we need to stop being like one body with like 100,000 locked off sectors. Because Jesus is looking for it all, not just part. So, I mean, any more thoughts on this topic of vulnerability?
I mean, I definitely think another method that you could also try if you're looking to try and become vulnerable more. I know journaling is also a very vulnerable thing to do. I know at least it's a start. I wouldn't solely do just journaling, but like if you're looking to kind of like express your feelings, I would definitely recommend that. And then maybe take it a step further, like, because I know, especially if you're conditioned to not be vulnerable, it can be very difficult, but God, or really anybody, is not asking you to just, quit cold turkey, be vulnerable right away. So it's however you need to do it. If it's just one person talk to, like, you can find one person. They have things online with like therapy and stuff where you don't even see the person anymore. It's just like a little text chat.
Actually, most addiction apps
Mm-hmm.
give options.
You mean social media? Yeah, I said it.
Wow.
I said it. I'm not
I
afraid
mean,
to say it.
that's fair. I mean, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But most apps like Sobriety, I think, is an app. Victory is an app that like.
Oh, you were talking about like addiction.
Yeah, addiction.
Oh, my bad. I thought you just meant apps that were addictive.
No,
Okay, that's on me.
literally about addictions like Sobriety, Victory. Or there's a few other ones that like if you're struggling with like alcohol, cigarettes, you have a sex addiction, vaping addiction, pornography addiction. Like you can log this stuff in here and track your like days free and stuff, which is very helpful, I think. And we'll definitely go on a whole subject about that another time. But you can type in there like, "Hey, I need prayer," and it's just sent to their like designated prayer people. Most churches have a prayer box, or like you can email the church staff, which like none of them are gonna. If you go to a mega church, none of them are probably gonna know who you are, so you're safe right away. And I mean, it certainly makes sure you feel comfortable with it. I mean, I really never grew up in a church that I felt comfortable sharing about any of my issues.
Yeah,
And
the church I grew up to, I wasn't either.
I mean, when I found Providence, it was the first church that I ever felt like I could trust my leaders and my colleagues to support me through my issues. And I mean, I went hard that night, shared a lot of stuff. And it's not doable unless that they create an atmosphere, which they have. So make sure the atmosphere is right, certainly.
And if you're struggling with that church, the church you're going to, where you feel like you can't be vulnerable or you can't talk to anybody, there's a solid chance you may have just outgrew that church. And there is, like, we're literally in the country, like, we're obviously in the U.S., if you can't tell, where we probably have more churches than any other country in the world, I would argue. So, like, just where we grow up, like, just on the way here, like, I came from work after this. Like, I probably drove by 4 or 5 churches just on the way here, you know? So, like, if you're struggling with the church that, and I know this is scary, but you can find other churches. You're not just stuck at the one that you're at. Like, you're not, like, there's different, like, sure, if you want to go by a different denomination or something, you can go right ahead. But that is something that I know I've also dealt with that. Like, I thought that I immediately went back to the church that I went to when I was a kid, but instantly didn't feel like I belonged. And I mean, my situation's a little different. I'll talk about that next episode, when I share my testimony. But I now go obviously to a different church, and not that the church that I went to was bad. There's people that have been there for years and years and years, but each person's different, and God understands that, and God knows that, and that's why I think there's so many different denominations, because each person reads and understands and worships and follows God in different ways. So that church just might not be the way that you want to do it, and that's okay. So find a new one. Go church shopping. It's very easy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I mean, we as Christians have to be in the area of being vulnerable, even in looking for a new church.
Yes.
Think about it.
It's a very scary thing.
It is a very scary thing. It's a very scary thing. But the fact of being vulnerable is going to be in your everyday life. We're not just talking about church here. We're talking about in your everyday life, in your actions. When you screw up and you say, "Oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that." That's being vulnerable. Like, who wants to say that? Being vulnerable is so much more than just saying the stuff you don't want to say. It's in your actions, it's in your mindset, and it's in your communication. It's in your heart. And certainly Jesus has paved the way that we can be vulnerable. And now that we've kind of sealed up that topic, we're going to end this episode of Hot Takes with Kamryn. But join us for our next episode, where Austin's going to be back, and we're going to be sharing the importance of our testimony, and he's going to share his testimony. Until then, see you next time. God bless.